Okay, in the last video we built the wing and got that all done. And this time we're going to be working on the main body. So this is Dave from ERC, and let's get started. Now this is actually the smaller Eagle, and we'll be working on the larger one. So this is the 1200, we'll be working on the 1430. First, let's break out all the plywood pieces we need to build the frame, including the servo tray and the motor mount. So let's glue in the servo tray. The wide side goes towards the front and the narrow side goes towards the back. The frame goes like this, and we're going to use some medium CA glue to glue it together. Apply some CA glue to the tab side, then put the piece into the slots. Use a square to make sure it's 90 degrees, and then spray it with some kicker to make sure it stays in place. Now let's put the glue on the other tab side. Put the rail in place, hold it, and make sure it's 90 degrees while we hit it with some kicker again. Now we're going to work on the beak reinforcement. Let's draw a line around the beak onto the 1/32 inch plywood. Then we're going to draw a line across where we're going to cut it. Now let's work on the top piece. We need little notches cut out for the foam. Now let's go ahead and cut the piece out using the lines that we just drew. This is what the beak reinforcement will look like once it's placed. Now let's go ahead and trace out the second piece and then go ahead and cut it out. This is what it'll look like when it's done. Now we're going to use some medium CA glue to glue in both pieces onto the foam. Then after the pieces are glued in, we can go ahead and place a book on it while they dry. Now let's test fit the frame to the foam. We're using the pegs to align the frame with the holes in the foam. Now we'll go ahead and use fabric tack to glue it down. We'll press it down to the foam and then pull it back apart and let the fabric tack up. Then later on, after about a couple minutes, we'll put it back on there and place some clamps on it and let it dry. Now let's do the other side. We'll go ahead and place fabric tack down the length of it. Put the foam over the top of it and then pull it back apart. Let it dry, then we'll place it on there and clamp it. We'll let both sides dry overnight. Now let's build the motor mount. We're going to glue both pieces together with the medium CA glue. Make sure the two pieces are aligned so that the holes perfectly align. Then put the claw nuts into the holes and tap them into place with a hammer. They should be flush on the bottom, just like this. Now let's test fit the motor mount. Glue the sides with CA glue again, and make sure the claw nuts are facing towards the inside of the fuselage. Now let's go ahead and clamp it and let it dry. Now let's glue in both of the top foam pieces. The back one goes between the sides, the front one goes on top of the sides. I'm going to leave the bottom open so that I can work on the electronics later. Let's put some fabric tack onto the sides of the rear piece. Then press it in place. Remove it and let it tack up. After a few minutes we can go ahead and place it back in and then put a clamp on it to hold it while it dries. Now let's do the front piece. We'll go ahead and put some fabric tack on the top of the edges. Put the top in place and then pull it back apart and let it tack up. I'll also add a little bit of fabric tack around the front where it bends. Okay, let's go ahead and put it on. and then hold it in place for a while and let that fabric tack work. And then we'll go ahead and put a clamp on it. I'll even put a little bit of glue underneath where it contacts the motor mount. Alright, now we'll put a clamp on there and let it dry. Now I'm going to put some bracing in just underneath the foam. I'm going to use some 1/2 inch square balsa wood and cut that to length. Then in the rear I'm going to use a popsicle stick to do the same thing, brace the edge of the foam. Cut that with some dikes. Then we're going to go ahead and use CA glue, medium CA, to glue in the balsa wood. Just going to slide that in. Make it even with the edge of the foam. We'll let that dry. Now we'll do the same thing to the popsicle stick. A little on the tips, a little on the top, slide it in. And that completes the bracing for the edges of the foam. Okay, we're going to cut the V-tail triangle piece to the length of the V-tail base. So we just mark that. Then go ahead and cut it with a small hobby saw. Then we're going to go ahead and put our medium CA all along the length. We don't want to get any on the very end of it, where it hangs over. Now we'll place it on there, try to keep it in the center, and one end flush with the edge of the foam near the middle. Now we're going to clamp it and let it dry for a while. And while it's drying, we'll go ahead and begin working on the battery box. So I've temporarily put the bottom plate in so I can mark it where the servo tray is. Then I'm going to remove it and figure out where the battery is going to go, and that's about 1.75 inches from the servo tray. So I'm going to put another mark there, and that's where the battery tray will go, in that area. So now I'm going to put the bottom plate on top of the battery tray and trace the contour of the battery according to the bottom plate. Then I'll cut out the battery tray, and it should be about the same size, no bigger than the bottom plate. Now I'm going to take some popsicle sticks and mark the length of the battery tray to be the same as those, because those will be the edges. Now let's cut off that piece and bend the popsicle sticks to be the same contour as the battery tray. Now I'm going to go ahead and use medium CA to glue in both sides. Then I'm going to put some reinforcement pieces on the bottom of the battery tray, again with CA glue. There's going to be 3 of those just to reinforce it. Now I'm test fitting the battery tray to make sure it's 1.75 inches from the servo tray. And I'm going to put some little marks where I'm going to have some other popsicle sticks for reinforcement. And I'm placing one in there, it's just a small piece, and I'm going to need 6 of those. So after cutting 6 the same length, I go ahead and glue them in with some fabric tack. They're placed right along the marks that I made earlier. Now I'm going to do the other side the same way. And that's what they look like. Now I'm going to put fabric tack onto the battery tray and place that inside, and then remove it to let it tack up. Now while it's tacking up, I'm going to go ahead and put some hook Velcro inside it to hold the battery. And then use some CA glue around the edges to make sure it won't tear off. Then I'll put the battery tray in and glue it in place. That's what it's going to look like. And then I'll put a clamp on it and let it dry. So we're almost done with this video. We're just going to glue on the tail feathers, and we're going to use the Husky digital sliding T-bevel to do the job. So the first thing I do is sand the edges of the tail feathers, so we're going to have that extra angle. And then I'm going to apply the foam tack along the triangle piece and do this on both sides. We're going the whole length. And the reason for that is we're going to have a 120-degree angle instead of the 90-degree angle that they recommend in the manual. This gives it more of a bird look. Then I'm going to apply foam tack to the edges of the tail feathers. And then we're going to go ahead and press them against the triangle piece to let the glue apply to it. And then we're going to pull them back apart and let them tack up. Now I'm setting the digital T-bevel to 120 degrees and holding it with a clamp while I press the tail feathers into place. And then let them rest on the T-bevel to get 120 degrees. So this is the setup. I've got a clamp holding the T-bevel and then another clamp to hold the fuselage down to the table, and then that'll let it dry in position. So in the next video, we'll be doing the electronics and closing up the bottom, and that will finish up this bird. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.